would have thought a sporting event's halftime show could have a bigger impact than the game itself. Well, the Super Bowl halftime show does exactly that. In 2024, Usher brought in an audience of 180 million worldwide, the biggest ever in the event's history. But how did singing and dancing get to be the centerpiece of America's biggest sporting event? The first edition of the Super Bowl was held in 1967 when the Green Bay Packers beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Los Angeles. Because of the sheer size of the event, organisers wanted to put on entertainment at halftime for the fans in the stadium. It was a display of marching bands, dancers and pure USA patriotism, and that was the theme that followed for years. In the 1980s, the Walt Disney Company got involved and we started seeing some interesting and questionable displays. But we got our first glimpse of halftime shows to come in '93 when none other than Michael Jackson stunned fans with his 15-minute medley of his own smash hits. When he walked out on stage, he had to wait for the crowd's cheers to die down for about 2 minutes before even starting his first song. Diana Ross, Gloria Estefan, Phil Collins all starred in their own shows, as did Aerosmith, who performed alongside NSYNC. Things got a little bit out of hand in 2004 when Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson produced perhaps the most famous or infamous wardrobe malfunction in history. Shows from the likes of Prince, Lady Gaga and Beyoncé are considered by critics as the best. To give you an idea of the scale of things, Rihanna's 2023 halftime show included roughly 800 people. These ranged from backing dancers to stage crew to camera operatives broadcasting to millions around the world. The whole stage for that show was built in roughly 8 minutes and was broken down and cleared away in the same time. The acts perform for free nowadays, even though the experts reckon it costs around $13 million to put on Rihanna's show. Artists know they'll rocket up the charts in the following weeks. Rihanna's average sales improved by 140% in the months following her performance. The Super Bowl halftime show will be a fixture in pop culture for years to come. So the question is, who next?
Yeah, hello everybody and welcome once again to TransEurope Express, your Sunday night fix of football from the continent and beyond. I'm Danny Kelly. With me as always is Andy Brassell. After last week's historic programme, we both did it from Kelly Castle here in Kilkenny, he's retreated to his northern fastness outside Newcastle. But I had great fun with Andy and his family down here last week. The show was pretty good too, and this one will be as well. We've got all the major stories from across the continent. We'll have Mbappe watch for you. We'll be previewing the Champions League and the Europa League and the Conference League. And we've got an absolute plethora of guests. Tim Vicker will join us from South America, as he always does. Çetin Cem Yilmaz will join us to talk about the scandal involving referees in Turkey. Daniele Fisichella will come on and talk about Italian football. Huge game going on tonight. They're well into the second half now between Milan and Roma. And we'll have the author Brendan Madden, whose book Once Upon a Time in La Liga, Spanish Football's Forgotten Tales, is full of really, really page-turning stuff. All of that, plus the poll and everything else you're used to here on TransEurope Express, coming up in the next 3 hours. Andy Brassell, me, Danny Kelly, you the listening millions. That's how it should be. Welcome to talkSPORT. Good evening, Andy.
Good evening, Danny. How are you?
Really, really good indeed. Lovely to hear from you. Of course, Vitor Pereira sacked 6 weeks after he signed a new contract. Southampton hold our coat. We'll get onto that later. 3 games going on in the big leagues at the moment. Why don't you give us the latest for them before we get stuck into the big story of the week?
Yeah, the real biggie, of course. We know that Roma could go purely clear at the top, 2 points clear at the top by winning at Milan this evening. At the moment, they are not doing so. They're not even keeping pace with Napoli. They are 1-0 down at Milan. Strahina Pavlovic scoring the goal right at the end of the first half there. It's 0-0 in France between Brest and Lyon, but loads going on there, actually. Lyon reduced to 10 men in the 7th minute. Hans Hattebar, having had not a great start to his Lyon career when he came on and was part of a team that lost a 3-0 lead in the week, got sent off on his first start today. But Lyon managing to hold on for the moment in one of the least hospitable arenas in France. And in Spain, it's Betis 3, Mallorca 0 already. A couple for Anthony there, as well as one for Ez Abde. This means that Betis, barring a miracle, are heading into the top 5 in La Liga.
Okay, let's get straight on to the big story of the week. You'll have read something about it. Jose Mourinho warned us about it 6 months ago. We all laughed at him. Turns out that over 300 hundreds of officials in Turkey have got betting accounts. Nearly 200 have been suspended, and one of them had made 18,000 bets. Listen, it's too much for me to deal with, but Cem Yilmaz is, of course, a Turkish football expert and great friend of the show. He joins us now. Good evening, Chetim.
Hello, good evening.
Listen, for those who haven't been keeping up with this, why don't you tell us the whole story and what exactly has happened over the past 7 days?
Yeah, on Monday morning, Turkish Football Federation Chairman İbrahim Hacı Osmanoğlu called an emergency meeting and made an announcement, shocking announcement, that out of 571 active refs in Turkey, 371 had accounts in gambling websites, betting websites, and 152 were actively playing. And Turkish Football Federation moved really swiftly, and they announced the names. They announced some of the games that were actually bet on. They didn't name who played in which game, put money on which game, something like that. But yeah, they announced that 149 of those referees were suspended from 8 months to 12 months. 3 referees are still being investigated. That's like a separate case at the moment. So this is where we are at the moment.
How shocked were people in Turkey when this huge number of referees were revealed to have active betting accounts? And then how shocked were they when, a vast number of them were suspended all at once?
Obviously, it's a huge shock. It's like a huge ethical, moral crisis. I mean, everyone was always, complaining about refs in Turkey. No one was happy. Not Galatasaray, not Fenerbahçe, not Beşiktaş. Every fan really dislikes them, but no one expected them to be embroiled in such huge betting issues, something like that. So this is like a huge shock. And what kind of surprised me the most is that Turkish Football Federation really acted swiftly on this one. I thought that this would be one of those cases in Turkey that would be dallied on forever, but they really moved quickly and announced the suspensions. But one of the 3 names that was separated, that's like the biggest name we have in this case. He's like Zorbay Küçük. He refereed so many important games in Turkey. He is one of the up-and-coming refs, and he was assigned to some preliminary European games as well, like in qualifiers of the yes, Champions League and Conference League. So it was a big shock, and he made a counter case against whoever, because he claims that he had been a victim of identity theft. He never opened a betting account. He said that his Turkish ID number was hacked. So I think this is why this case was separated, because if he was deemed to be involved in some of the games that he actually bet on, that would be a huge another case. But at the moment, we don't have all the details on which ref bet on which game.
And Chetin, as you were saying, yeah, I think it's really interesting, as you say, how quickly the TFF reacted. And you talked about Hacı Osmanoğlu and his statement. It's really interesting how he said that not only do we need to investigate these referees, we need to really investigate presidents, board. We need to investigate ourselves and the TFF. And that, to me, felt like a massive departure. A feeling that, as you say, that it feels as if something's fundamentally wrong in the game, and that there can't be a blind eye turned to it, that it has to be something that's dealt with at every single level.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, speaking from experience, I didn't have the highest hopes for this case as well because pretty much every case is being, in football we have this everywhere, but in Turkey we have this even more, like the tribal mentality. So when it's about a certain club chairman, fans would defend them, something like that. So I thought that this would be one of those cases that would, again, be postponed forever and it would be watered down and all that. But the Turkish Football Federation sounds really serious about this, and he might, I don't know how they will do it in the short term, but I think an overhaul of the whole refereeing structure might be on the cards. But they need to be bringing new referees, like hundreds of them, if all of them are
Wow.
suspended. It would be a complete overhaul of the system. I don't know if
So,
that will
so
happen, but
Chetin,
that's what we're looking
sorry
at.
to interrupt, but
Of course.
we've already seen that because of the lack of transparency and the lack of faith in match officials in Turkey, that other referees and
Yeah.
assistants and VAR officials from other countries have been brought over. Now, this has been reflected in other championships as well, but the Turkish Super League has been one of the major proponents of this. Are we looking at larger scale importation of referees from other European countries now, do you think?
That might be the case, especially in big games. But funnily enough, this weekend we had two major derbies, two big games in uh, Turkish Super League. Galatasaray played Trabzonspor and Beşiktaş played Fenerbahçe, and they were relatively uneventful in terms of refereeing, which is unheard of in Turkish football history. There's always complaints. One side blames the ref, or usually both sides even blame them. This weekend it was like uneventful, and the referees did a good job. I don't know how to interpret this, but yeah,
Keeping their heads down, Chetim. Keeping their heads down.
yes, probably that was the case. I mean, yeah, I think that especially in more serious big games, more foreign referees, international referees might be on the cards, but Turkish Football Federation hasn't said much about this. Next steps, they are talking, saying that we will definitely sort this out. This won't be swept under the rug and all that. But it might be that they might be serious this time. We'll see.
I love the idea of all this being swept under those lovely Turkish rugs. It really is. It's very, very good indeed. Chetin, just for some background detail here, what is the betting landscape like in Turkey? Because, of course, if in Britain, you can bet in a different million ways with different kinds of companies on multiple platforms. Is it the same or different in Turkey?
It's the same. It's a bit more regulated by the government, actually. There is the official betting authority, and the number of selections are mostly limited, and it's not as widespread as like the whole sports and every little detail, like the first throw-in type of thing. They do not really exist in Turkish betting scene, but it's very wide, and this is one of the reasons that some people are, resorting to illegal betting websites as well. It's also a huge market as well. I don't know if there will be another crackdown on this as well, because this is also a huge issue in Turkish society as well. But yeah, it's highly regulated, and it's like a monopoly in terms of betting. There is one big major running company.
I won't ask you to comment on Jose Mourinho revealing all this in one of his dynamite interviews about 5 months ago. But if you open the window in your house now, you can hear the laughter from Lisbon. It's a long way from Lisbon to Istanbul, but you can hear the laughter out the window. Talk to us about the big game tonight then, Besiktas against Fenerbahce.
Yeah, it was a really interesting game because Beşiktaş was really storming. They found two goals in the first 20 minutes, but then Orkun Kökçü was sent off, and in the last hour it was a completely different game. Fenerbahçe fought back, scored three goals, and one of them, the winning goal, came from John Duran. It was such a welcome goal for Fenerbahçe fans as well, because Duran didn't have the best starts to life at Fenerbahçe. He was injured a lot. This was his first league goal, and scored in a derby, scored in the third minute of a game, and he won the game with won the ball with a sliding tackle. So he purely created it himself. So he should be really happy about this one, and Fenerbahce fans are definitely very happy because they're now on the second spot behind Galatasaray, and they are still unbeaten.
Thank you very much. Çetin Cem Yılmaz there from Turkey, bringing us all the latest on that. Well, I mean, it's seismic, the number of referees involved. And I think 9 of the top level referees have been suspended, which means I presume they're going to find referees for Champions League games as well in the next few days. And thanks to Çetin for joining us here on TransEurope Express, where next we'll be looking at everything that's been going on in Germany, including, I'm afraid, the end of any rivalry between Bayern Munich and Bayer Leverkusen. Welcome back to TransEurope Express. Let me tell you about tonight's poll. Later on, we'll be covering in Mbappe Watch all the controversy and uproar surrounding Vinicius Jr. at Real Madrid. But let's imagine he was to leave Real Madrid in the summer. Where could he go? Where would he go? The 4 things we've put in for you in our poll are PSG, Arsenal, Manchester City or Saudi Arabia. That's PSG, Arsenal, City or Saudi. You can vote in that. It's a Twitter poll, really. An X poll at talkSPORT, at Danny Kelly Words or Andy Brassell, 2 S's and 2 L's. Go and vote now. Where's Vinicius Jr.'s most likely next stop? Now, let's talk about Germany, where Andy has put his extensive knowledge of the music of Roxette to good use here with our headline. It was great, but now it's over. Because 2 years ago, Bayer Leverkusen won the title, denying Bayern their umpteenth successive triumph. And for a while, we thought maybe this was going to become a rivalry. But this week's result in the Allianz, Andy, has put any idea of that absolutely to sleep.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite rainy enough for me to look out through a raindrop flecked window in the style of Roxette. But of course, I'm a little bit sad about it. We knew it was coming. I think the way this, what could have been a future classicer, I suppose, is not that, was a 5:30 on Saturday night of UK time, Topspiel, which is where they have the big game on the German weekend. But it never felt like it was going to be between Bayern and Leverkusen last night. And so it proved. It was 3-0 to Bayern already at half-time. They cruised through the second half because they've got a big Champions League game in the week. Of course, they're playing Paris Saint-Germain. And with that in mind, they felt so comfortable playing Leverkusen that they'd not started Harry Kane or Michael Olise or Luis Diaz,
wow,
which is remarkable, really, when you think about it. And they were still able to knock them over very, very easily. That man Serge Gnabry was absolutely fantastic again, and Bayern were just outstanding. Young Leonard Carl was very good as well, and of course, Kane and Diaz came on for a little jog around, a little bit of a loosener before the game. Firstly, from Nicholas Jackson as well, and it just really, for anyone hoping for some sort of title race, it wasn't great news. But I think we have to really put our expectations with Leverkusen in a reasonable place, because not only did Xabi Alonso go, but tons of players went this summer. They've had a massive player turnover. Yeah. They thought it was the right moment to do so. They sold over 200 million euros worth of players. And now they've got a lot of good players, but moulding those into a team, especially after the failed Erik ten Hag experiment, is going to take time that you basically don't have when you're in the Champions League. And, you're just learning off laptops and off screens in the dressing room, really, a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's a real slap in the face for Bayer Leverkusen. Mind you, it is, of course, worth noting that Bayern Munich have slapped all people that they've met so far squarely across the chops. So now probably Andy Dortmund move into the unhappy position of being Bayern's main challengers. They had a 1-0 win at Augsburg. No big deal, you might say, but interesting. That the participation, at least partially, and then the commenting on Job Bellingham's performance. Yeah, because as we've said before, and as seems diecast from the very start, there's no real reasonable examination of Job Bellingham and how he's getting on. Too much is expected. Every little performance that isn't the best is treated as a massive big deal. As we said, I don't think his management, his entourage have helped with this. Of course, his father Mark came in the dressing room after the first game at St. Pauli, and that was a huge thing. But it was interesting hearing Niko Kovac, who's, I guess, the tough guy of Dortmund, coming out and praising him afterwards, doing the arm around the shoulder, saying, look, he has great physicality and a technical quality that he showed again here in his 30 minutes on the pitch. I really have no doubts about him. Quite the opposite. We're building him up step by step. In fact, it's going even faster than I expected because the boy has so much quality. I mean, he sounds like the Emperor talking about Luke Skywalker, doesn't he? He's just like rubbing his hands and going, come on, give in to your negative feelings, boy. Do 12 kilometres running a game. You can do it. And he does know he can do it, obviously, because he's done it in the Championship. So actually, I think this not only shows that Bellingham maybe is in the right place, which has been something we've doubted from the very beginning, certainly under Kovac, never mind Dortmund, but under Kovac at Dortmund at this moment, but also that he really is Kovac's cup of tea. I think that's something that's not been really underlined, because Kovac is the guy who likes his team to do the dirty work, and he doesn't care about stars. He doesn't care about how much people cost or any of that. But actually, the things that are going to appeal to him about Job Bellingham, whereas we've all talked, and you and I have talked about how politically it's something very difficult for Dortmund to handle,
Kovac doesn't care about any of that.
No.
So really, in that sense, he's in the right spot.
That's definitely the case. Andy, let's talk then about a game in Hamburg where something had to give. St. Pauli, after their brilliant start to the season, had lost 6 on the spin. Borussia Mönchengladbach hadn't won a Bundesliga game since March, so it really was some terrible record had to be broken. How did that one go?
Yeah, Borussia Mönchengladbach finally have got a win this season, 4-0 in the end, quite emphatic. And this is probably the result that will get their standing coach, Eugen Polanski, who used to play for them, of course, the job on a permanent basis. Now, of course, that's not been publicly confirmed by Ruven Schröder, the new sporting director, mainly because they've got FC Köln in the derby next week. So if he confirms him and then they get smashed in the derby, it'll be left looking an idiot. So he can't do that. And of course, it'll coincide with the next international break. So they've got time to all take a deep breath and decide what they're going to do. But it was really positive from Mönchengladbach. They've won 2 in a row because they won in the week in the DFB Pokal. There are a full round of DFB Pokal games in the week. The highlight of tonight's draw, by the way, is Dortmund playing Leverkusen in the last 16. That will happen in the first midweek in December. But Gladbach were fantastic, and they actually looked as if they knew what they were doing in the final third of the pitch. They were intelligent, they were enterprising, they rode out a rough start. Haris Tabakovic, who looked like their only useful attacker really, with Tim Kleindienst still out injured, he played really well and scored a couple of goals and got an assist too. And I think the fact that Florian Neuhaus had such a good game, bear in mind that when he initially came into the Gladbach team, people were talking about it being inevitable that he would end up at Bayern Munich eventually. Now, you may remember that he got dumped from the first team at the start of the season after a fan caught him on his phone, recorded him on his phone, slagging off the sporting director at the time. Yeah. And then he got dumped in the under-23s. So I think to make players who've been marginalised useful again is really important too. And St. Pauli, all of a sudden, they look in proper trouble.
Yeah, when you're losing to a team who hasn't won for over 6 months, when you're losing 4-0 at home, you are in trouble. And who's your star of the week in Germany?
You know what? I've gone for Romelu of Leipzig. Goal and an assist for him. Leipzig have looked absolutely fantastic in recent weeks, and they beat Stuttgart 3-1, a win which was even more comfortable than it sounded, mainly because when Stuttgart were coming back into the game after Leipzig had most of it, Alexander Nubel, the always next Germany goalkeeper, tripped over the ball and Romelu dribbled it around him to score the goal that clinched the game. But he's come over having scored a lot of goals in the Turkish Super League. So as you can see, he's hitting all my sweet spots. He's looking very good in his early weeks at Leipzig.
Well, my star of the week had a fantastic week. He's a man called Ragnar Ake, and he plays for Cologne. He scored for Cologne against Bayern Munich in the Cup in midweek. Admittedly, that did go on to be an absolute battering for Cologne. But then this weekend, he got his first Bundesliga goal this season, and the opener as they beat Hamburg by 4-1. Now, that game was not as it seemed. Hamburg had 9 men for long stretches of it, but was still pressing late on when it was still 2-1 for an equaliser. The cherry on the cake and then the icing on the cherry on the cake with the 2 late goals for Cologne came because the game had 12 extra minutes of added on time, because in one case the referee and the officials took 6 minutes, count that, 6 minutes, to decide on a disallowed goal for Hamburg. The game is going sideways with this, and we're going to have to do something about it. But well done to Ragnar Ake, who's had a very good week and is my star of the week. Andy, very quickly, why don't you give us, well, actually, huge moment in the game in Milan. It's still 1-0 to Milan. Roma, if they win, can go top. They've got a penalty, Andy.
And it's been saved by Mike Maignan. Maybe one of the outstanding goalkeepers in world football. You know, Paulo Dybala doesn't miss penalties.
That's massive.
And it's a brilliant save from him. So corner to Roma, 10 minutes left there. Still 1-0 to Milan.
Well, he hasn't missed it where I'm watching, but hang on. Let's see if he saves it
again. A role
again.
Reversal?
Oh, yeah, I know. He saved it again, Andy. So it's still 1-0 to Milan. When we come back in a few seconds' time, let's talk about everything that's been going on in France. Now listen, 3 times Premier League winner Joe Cole will be live in the studio with Jeff Stelling and Ali McCoist on The Breakfast Show. Tomorrow morning, the Chelsea and West Ham legend will give his verdict on Enzo Maresca as the Blues look to rediscover their glory days under Todd Boehly and his gang. And he'll share his take on whether Jared Bowen should move club in January to secure his World Cup spot. The boys will also be discussing this season's title race and asking Joe whether his old club Liverpool can still win it despite their slow start. That's Joe Cole live on talkSPORT Breakfast tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. Set your alarms. So Andy, now we're going to talk about the football in France, the headline of which, I'm delighted to say, is Baywatch. Because it's been a huge weekend for the former Newcastle and Hull player, these days Rennes manager Habib Beye.
That's right. I'm a bit disappointed that you didn't use what the Newcastle United fans used to use as his song. You know, the Sunday, Monday, Habib Beye, Tuesday, Wednesday, Habib Beye. But anyway, that's pretty good. I can't fault you on the headline. But yeah, he's been under a lot of pressure recently. Bear in mind that only won 2 games all season, despite spending a lot of money, as they always do and they always have in the last 3-4 years, Rennes. And for that reason, he was under the pump. They lost last weekend. They lost a 2-goal lead in the week, having been 2-0 up at Toulouse.
Was he in danger, Andy? Before this game. Big danger. You know, the club had to brief that he wouldn't be fired before the game in the week, and then they went on to lose a 2-goal lead at Toulouse on top of that. So there was no doubt, especially facing Strasbourg. I guess they're aiming at the same sort of spot. Teams that believe they should be in European competition, and with a fair win, they can maybe get into the Champions League with a financial weakness of a lot of clubs in France at the moment, as we've discussed. So for Strasbourg and Liam Zinnia to turn up at Roazhon Park, and they're all new and shiny, and the upwardly mobile team of Liga, and Rennes to give them an absolute hiding was huge for Habib Beye. Now, he took a couple of brave decisions. He left up a couple of big players. He left out Seko Fofana on the bench, his midfield general, left out Ludovic Blas as well. But really, it was all about Esteban Laporte. And Liam Rosenior has been talking so much about his guy, Paniquet, who's been brilliant up front for them and the top scorer in Liga, kept totally quiet today. And Esteban Laporte, who came through the Lyon Academy but never made it into the first team, joined Rennes from Angers at the start of the season. Hat-trick today. Bear in mind, he's not been in a particularly good team for most of this season. 8 goals and 3 assists in 10 starts. It's fantastic. And Rosenior said afterwards, look, I know I've been talking about my guy is the striker in Ligue 1, but Laporte was brilliant today. And he's absolutely right. And he saved his coach. Yeah, that's a great hat-trick, but the best hat-trick was in the Eredivisie. You'll hear about that towards the end of the show. Interesting move by Strasbourg, Andy, given their connection to Chelsea as well, that David Weir rather surprisingly let go as director of football by Brighton after doing some astonishing work over the past 2 or 3 years, has now become technical director at Strasbourg.
Yeah, well, actually, the other way around. Technical director at Brighton and
now
promoted to director of football at Strasbourg. So really a promotion, I suppose. They made some big moves behind the scenes already this summer, Strasbourg. So, look, we know they're going in one direction. Now, obviously, there's this intrinsic tension between ultras who believe that, you know, their club shouldn't be subordinate to other clubs in the blue whatever you think of the setup. Now, Weir is someone who at least had his hand in bringing in and selling on at great profit some players for Brighton. If Strasbourg can do something similar, and they're already on the right track in terms of what they've done with Dilma Bakwa, and of course the move for Emmanuel Omega, who's been out of the team with that hamstring injury, but is going to Chelsea next summer, as we know, which has been the source of some consternation. It'll be interesting to see them develop, and it'll be interesting to see what Chelsea do about that in their future management decisions, because of course they've been using Strasbourg, and that's been one of the complaints by those ultras, as a farm club to develop those players. And, you know, there's no doubt that Chelsea are having a look at Panakei already, even if he's a little bit ahead of schedule. Will they be looking at David Weir a couple of cycles down the line, depending on how he goes?
Listen, okay, that'll be one to keep an eye on. Business as usual, I guess, for Paris Saint-Germain at home to Nice, but left it late.
Yeah, they did, and it's funny. It was one of those games where you wonder if Kvisha Kvaratskhelia just saves his best for the Champions League. It's very quiet from him, very tentative from him. And when you think of him and Barcola being in there, Nice, who've been improved recently, who on XG should probably be in the bottom 3 or 4. They've got a couple of decent results at the moment. They beat Lille during the week, and they held PSG out like with reasonable comfort for a lot of the game, and then conceding this goal to Gonzalo Ramos right near the end. And he's so good at that. He's so good at coming on and taking advantage of tired defence.
Don't tell Spurs fans.
Heartbreaking.
Meanwhile, Marseille, you could argue, are back on the horse with a 1-0 away win at Auxerre, which was, you know, complicated a bit by there was a full load of midweek results. You might want to give us some of those as well, Andy. Yeah,
so there were some real shocks during the week. So Marseille needed, when given to them by an Angel Gomez goal, he's settling really well in Provence after making that free transfer move from Lille. And then I think you look at the fact that they really needed that because they considered a 95th minute equaliser at home to the aforementioned Angers during the week. There are some promising young players, but are one of the weakest teams in the division. Should never be happening to Marseille at the Velodrome. But it wasn't just Marseille in the week. You had PSG dropping points away at Lorient, and Lyon, who are just about holding on to this 0-0 draw at Brest. We're in the closing seconds there. They've been down to 10 men since the 7th minute. This would feel like a lot better draw than the one in the week where they were 3-0 up at Paris FC and managed to fritter it away.
Well, it's to Paris FC that we turn for my star of the week. As you say, they had that brilliant comeback in their little stadium next to Paris Saint-Germain's big stadium. And they've continued their great form because they won at Monaco this weekend. So their Nigerian forward and Moses Simon scored the winner. That has to be my star of the week in France. Who is yours?
I'm going to shock you by going for a Portuguese player playing his trade in France. Not Afonso Moreira, who's had a great week for Lyon, the former Sporting winner, but Felix Correa, who has been quietly doing a very good job at Lille. His first 2 goals in the beating of Metz last weekend, and he scored the winner today against Angers. They just keep coming up, honestly, to get Lille back on the horse after that defeat at Nice in the week.
Yes, well, next we're going to talk about Italy, where the people who run their big clubs have watched the goings-on at Southampton, have watched the goings-on at Wolverhampton Wanderers, and have said, hang on a second, hold our coats. Jordan also returns to the talkSPORT airways tomorrow morning from 10 a.m. as he joins Jim White and former Newcastle manager Steve Bruce. Steve and Simon, of course, are old, inverted commas, friends as they look back on another hectic weekend in the world of sport. That's White and Jordan with Steve Bruce from 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Andy, the final whistle has gone in Milan. It's finished AC Milan 1, Roma 0, a goal by Pavlovic in about the 35th minute. Have the games in Spain and France similarly ended?
Brest 0, Lyon 0. Pretty much a rearguard action from Lyon as that game went on. Of course, they played 83 minutes with 10 men. They're still in the top 6, though, having got that pretty decent draw in the end. Ended in Milan as well. Milan 1, Roma 0. Mike Maignan making the big difference. Pavlovic scoring the winner in the first half. Really lovely crafted goal. But Dybala's seeing his penalty saved in the last 10 minutes by Mike Maignan. Brilliant by him. And this leaves Serie A looking like this. I've got to read you through the table because even at this early stage, it seems like no one wants to be top. So we've got Napoli, who are top, 22 points. Inter 21, they won today earlier at Verona. Milan 3rd, Roma 4th. And 2nd, 3rd, 4th, Milan, Inter, Milan, Roma, all on 21 points.
Okay, and the game in Betis, in Seville, has also ended, has it?
No, it's coming to an end, but still going, still 3-0 to Betis. There's about 7 minutes left plus change.
Thank you very much. Well, Milan against Roma is a big game. Perhaps we'll talk about the meaning of that in just a little while, but there's so much else to talk about in Italy. We thought we'd better get friend of the show, part of the furniture and Italian football expert, Daniele Fisichella on. Good evening, Daniele.
Good evening, Danny. Good evening, Andy.
Thank you for joining us. Let's start with the managers already getting the chop in Italy. The biggest one, I guess, Igor Tudor gone at Juve, and the very familiar figure of Luciano Spalletti in.
And last night he debuted with a 2-1 victory at Cremona for Juventus, a win that Juventus deserved. And, ultimately, the adventure could not have started better because after only 60 seconds, Juventus were already ahead with a very well-crafted goal, an action that started on the right. The ball was touched by 6 or 7 Juventus players and then concluded on the left by Filip Kostic, and that gave Spalletti a good way into Juventus' job. Then the second goal, Juventus, maybe in the second half, some of the old habits crept in with Vardy scoring the 2-1 for Cremonese, but ultimately a good debut for Spalletti, who only had one training session with Juve and already starting seeing some of his ideas, the so-called Spallettata here in Italy. One above all, Tinko Miners playing as a centre-back. Yes, you had it right, as a third centre-back. Maybe because Spalletti understood that Tinko Miners hasn't got a great relationship with goals at Juventus, but he wanted to have somebody with good fit to build the action from there. So already starting to implementing his ideas, and to be fair, it worked. But of course, there's still more work to do for Spalletti, who's back in the game only 3 months after getting the sack from Italy and pretty much condemning Italy to playing in the World Cup playoff next year.
Daniele, is this pretty exciting?
Far away, yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, Daniele, is this potentially pretty exciting for Serie A? Because we looked at all those brilliant attacking players that Juventus had and thought, how are they going to fit them all in the same team? The answer didn't seem obvious under Igor Tudor, and he seemed very inflexible to try and bring different players into the team. He couldn't get much out of Jonathan David or Lois Openda. Is there the sense that if we think of Spalletti and his history of playing free-flowing football, this could be something that could really light the blue touch paper in the league?
It looks like is a good team for Spalletti to work with because of the abundance of a talented player, and especially the presence of some creative ones like Yildiz that yesterday could not play because of a knock. And I think that's where everything will revolve around it. The more central figure of somebody like Yildiz that often with Tudor was deployed wide on the left, did produce some moments of brilliance, but was never quite as influential as many would have thought. Spalletti is a very sophisticated manager with a great experience, but is also very creative. And that's what the Juventus establishment and fans ask of him, to try to find the way to make the most of a team that has invested a lot in the summer in forward areas, perhaps should have strengthened the midfield as much as Tudor wanted, and that's why probably Tudor never felt quite the full backing from the Juventus hierarchies. But ultimately, Spalletti has got the pedigree of being a manager that likes to work on the training pitch, and that's maybe perhaps he never quite worked too much with Italy. He didn't work out because he didn't have time to work with the team. His concept and his philosophy of football can be quite complicated and meticulous, but he does have time. Time is on his hand because Juventus run of fixtures is getting easier. Sporting, Torino, Fiorentina, and then Napoli at the beginning of December, and of course that's where probably Spalletti is going to be tested. But ultimately, the minimum objective for Juve, that's what's written at least in Spalletti's contract, is to arrive in the top 4. But Spalletti was quite bold when in his press conference he said, Scudetto, why not? He knows that this is a league that, as you remember, just at the top, has got no owner at the end of the day. There are 4 teams in 1 point, and Juventus only 18. And again, is a projected low points tally after last season, Napoli winning with just 82 points. So Juventus, if they find the right balance, Spalletti, he's given time, as he will be. I think that's a good choice.
Yeah, so that was Igor Tudor, one former Juventus player sacked, and another has gone as well at Genoa, where, of course, the very familiar figure of Patrick Vieira has been shown the door.
And the Frenchman pays the bad results because this is the worst Genoa start in the Serie A history. They never had so few points. They are still to win a game. And it's a project that never took off. Last season, Patrick Vieira was hired with the hope that he would save the team, which he actually did. But in the summer, he has not been backed up. The team has not been strengthened. They've lost the only goal scorer they had last season, Pinamonti, replaced by other young players. Perhaps they've been fairly unlucky in a couple of home teams. I remember the game against Parma a couple of weeks ago when they missed a penalty in the 95th minute, which would have given a deserved victory. But ultimately, Vieira, who, by the way, is still under contract until 2027, felt that the project was no longer right for him. There is a new owner at Genoa since last summer, the Romanian Suku. There was a new sporting director, Lopez, just brought in from Nantes. He felt basically the environment completely detached, and he decided to step down even before tomorrow's game that they're going to play at Sassuolo. So it's going to be Mimo Criscito, the caretaker manager, stepping in. And by the way, a bad situation for both the Genoa clubs, because also Sampdoria are at the bottom this time of Serie B, so it could be a double relegation in the same season. But I do think that at least Genoa got enough quality to climb up the table.
And
Daniele, I guess two things with Genoa. Firstly, the fact that Daniele De Rossi could be one of the candidates to take over, and I'd love to see him back in Serie A after he's cut off at Roma right at the beginning of last season. Secondly, lovely to see Mario Balotelli, a big favourite of this show, pop his head above the parapet, because of course he was signed by Alberto Gilardino. Then Gilardino was sacked about 10 days later, which kind of finished Balotelli's Genoa career, because Vieira never fancied him.
No, and they never fancied him when he was back at Nice, if you remember. They had a bust-up. But yeah, yes. Balotelli took on the social media just to let us know what he thinks, and he said, God sees and adjusts everything. That's what he says in Italian. And he just talks about this connection with the Genoa fans. He ended up this message on Instagram saying, Forza Genoa. I'm not sure the Genoa fans feel the same or reciprocating, because really Balotelli didn't really leave a mark at Genoa. But yeah, he made it felt that Vieira was not the right person. And yeah, for the next manager, well, let's see what Genoa does tomorrow against Sassuolo. De Rossi is in the frame. He's been linked to the job, and it could be a good move. But there is also could be Palladino, former Fiorentina manager. Of course, unless Fiorentina sacks Pioli, who's still in a very perilous situation, and then Palladino could go back to Fiorentina. But yeah, if they do, that will be 3 sackings in a week. I don't think this ever happened before in Serie A.
Yeah, I mean, Pioli has survived the fact that Fiorentina still haven't got a win this season, though they're doing fantastically well in Europe. Listen, as always, Daniele, thank you so much for your knowledge, expertise and enthusiasm. Andy, who's your star of the week in Italy?
Nicolo Zaniolo, because I love a bad boy, and he's on a good streak at the moment. Scored the winner for Udinese against Atalanta, one of his many former clubs yesterday. Brilliant left foot finish. Oh, come on, he's going to make it to the World Cup with Italy, isn't he? Come on.
My star of the week is an unlikely candidate for the goal scorer of the goal of the season in Italy. But Pietro Zielinski's goal for Inter in their 2-1 win at Verona, it was a struggle for Inter, actually. Get a chance to look at Zielinski's goal, and you'll see why I think it might be a candidate for the goal of the season. And he is my star of the week. That first hour has flown by. We'll be back very, very soon with more. Don't go anywhere else. Stick with the mighty, mighty TransEurope Express.
Who would have thought a sporting event's halftime show could have a bigger impact than the game itself? Well, the Super Bowl halftime show does exactly that. In 2024, Usher brought in an audience of 180 million worldwide, the biggest ever in the event's history. But how did singing and dancing get to be the centerpiece of America's biggest sporting event? The first edition of the Super Bowl was held in 1967 when the Green Bay Packers beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Los Angeles. Because of the sheer size of the event, organisers wanted to put on entertainment at halftime for the fans in the stadium. It was a display of marching bands, dancers and pure USA patriotism, and that was the theme that followed for years. In the 1980s, the Walt Disney Company got involved and we started seeing some interesting and questionable displays. But we got our first glimpse of halftime shows to come in '93 when none other than Michael Jackson stunned fans with his 15-minute medley of his own smash hits. When he walked out on stage, he had to wait for the crowd's cheers to die down for about 2 minutes before even starting his first song. Diana Ross, Gloria Estefan, Phil Collins all starred in their own shows, as did Aerosmith, who performed alongside NSYNC. Things got a little bit out of hand in 2004 when Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson produced perhaps the most famous or infamous wardrobe malfunction in history. Shows from the likes of Prince, Lady Gaga and Beyoncé are considered by critics as the best. To give you an idea of the scale of things, Rihanna's 2023 halftime show included roughly 800 people. These ranged from backing dancers to stage crew to camera operatives broadcasting to millions around the world. The whole stage for that show was built in roughly 8 minutes and was broken down and cleared away in the same time. The acts perform for free nowadays, even though the experts reckon it costs around $13 million to put on Rihanna's show. Artists know they'll rocket up the charts in the following weeks. Rihanna's average sales improved by 140% in the months following her performance. The Super Bowl halftime show will be a fixture in pop culture for years to come. So the question is, who next?
Yeah, welcome back everybody to the second hour of TransEurope Express. It's 3 hours, of course. It could really do 5, but the station can't afford Andy for 5 hours. You're listening to Danny Kelly and him, Andy Brassell. Just 3 hours we can afford of Andy's company to take us through all the big stories from across Europe during this 60 minutes. We'll be bringing you the latest from Real Madrid, everything else that's happening in Spain, and then we'll start to look at a whole raft Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of Champions League, Europa League and Europa Conference League fixtures, many of them involving teams from these islands and many of them live here on talkSPORT. That's all coming up very, very soon. Welcome one, welcome all to TransEurope Express, where it is now, of course, as is traditional, time for this.
Mbappe, Mbappe, Mbappe! Sa carrière, le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappe! Mbappe! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, Suto! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de Kylian Mbappe. Allez, Kylian!
And Andy, it's only in the harem-scarum world of Real Madrid that Kylian Mbappe could have a brilliant goal against Valencia, a brilliant game against Valencia, including scoring twice, but end up being, if not the villain of the piece, not even the headline of the piece. We could easily call this Vinicius Watch this week, couldn't we? Tell us the story.
We could, Danny. And, I think after beating Valencia 4-0. You look at many eras of Spanish football, and that looks like a brilliant result. Of course, there are two things that you have to bear in mind. Firstly, that Valencia are terrible at the moment and mired in the bottom three, and obviously we've talked about their problems, and no doubt, unfortunately, we'll continue to talk about their problems throughout the season. But also the fact that Real Madrid's not Real Madrid if everyone's not having a row, right? And this goes back to
that's why they've got their own section, isn't it?
It exactly is. Mbappe's just the name above the door, really. Everyone's involved, and I think it goes back to El Clasico last week when Vinicius had a massive strop when he was substituted, and came out and apologised earlier in the week to everyone at the club, to the president, to the board, to the supporters, to his teammates. Not specifically to Xabi Alonso, which I thought was quite an interesting framing of it. Now, I completely agree with everything he's saying in terms of, I want to be part of this team. I want us to win stuff. I believe in meritocracy, but not when I get taken off. Oh, my God. No. That's the worst. And it's one man who's taken me off and I'm not having it, was the quite strong subtext of that, I felt. So anyway, all going smoothly. Both players start the game against Valencia, building up to the game against Liverpool away in the Champions League this week. And Mbappe scores the first two, won a penalty, looking super smooth. Of course, he's in great form this season.
He's very physical, Nick Andy. That seems to be the crucial thing to me. He looks in fantastic physical shape.
That is the main part of it. I totally agree, Danny. So anyway, they get a second penalty, and you think, oh, this is great. We can put away his first half hat trick. But no, because it's all about polishing the right egos at Real Madrid, he gives Vinicius the penalty instead. And what does Vinicius do? He misses it. So obviously, Real Madrid, it doesn't really matter because Real Madrid go on, win the game. Jude Bellingham scores. Jude Bellingham's another who's in brilliant form at the moment. Fantastic goal by him from outside the penalty box. Alvaro Carrera scores his first goal for Real Madrid with the goal of the game. Fantastic cross shot into the top corner, which no one is expecting. And it's 4-0 to Real Madrid, keeping them 5 points clear at the top of the league. They're actually 8 clear ahead of Barcelona's game today, but Barcelona won, as we'll explain in the next section. Anyway, Mbappe comes off the pitch, and if he's daft enough to turn on the television and listen to what people have got to say about Real Madrid, he will hear people quoting him off, despite the fact he's scored 2 goals and they've won 4-0, because people are saying, well, why is he giving the penalty to Vinicius? And I guess this goes back right to the beginning when we're talking about ego management. We said about Carlo Ancelotti last season, didn't he? Why is he rotating the penalty taker? Well, actually, I suppose Ancelotti is the most obvious person to rotate a penalty taker as a coach, because, he's the ultimate kid glove wearer, the guy who makes sure all the egos are in the right place and no one explodes at the wrong time. Now, whereas this was used as a stick to beat Mbappe with at the beginning of his Real Madrid career, like he's bottling it. He doesn't want to take the penalties at the right moment, rather than the actual situation of fragile egos and all the rest of it. Jude Bellingham had to be allowed to take penalties every so often because of his repositioning. He wasn't scoring so many goals last season. And now Mbappe's trying to keep the peace. One journalist on Cadena Ser said, look, this isn't a kid's game. This is an actual professional game of football. Just, you're the penalty taker. Take the penalty and score the penalty. And
the thing is, Andy,
Alonso talked about.
Yeah. The thing is, the fans on radio phone-ins, as we know, are very much entitled to their opinion, but the only one that matters is Xabi Alonso, and he was none too pleased about the whole situation. No,
I mean, you should have seen his face when Vinicius lost. He missed the penalty. He's someone who's quite inscrutable, but he found it quite hard to cover up what he was actually feeling. And he was asked about it afterwards, and he said, well, look, obviously it's not ideal. I would have preferred it if we'd have scored the penalty, and Kylian is our number 1 penalty taker. And that was it. He just left it hanging there. So at the moment, it does feel as if Xabi Alonso and Vinny Jr. are very much like that episode of The Simpsons where Monty Burns and Smithers have had a row, and they're at either end of that massively long table in the castle and not passing the salt. It does feel a little bit like that. So it's down to Kylian to pass the salt at the moment.
Andy, there are two monstrous games in the Champions League this week. We'll talk a little about one of them a little later on. But the other one, of course, is Anfield on Tuesday, where Liverpool take on Real Madrid. We might as well preview that here since we're doing Mbappe watch. Of course, in this country, there'll be a great deal of Trent Alexander watch. He's not going to start, though, is he? He just hasn't had enough football for a game this size.
No, unused sub yesterday against Valencia, which is the first time that he's been back since he tore his hamstring against Marseille in the Champions League, going back to the first match day of the Champions League. No, I mean, the only situation in which he's playing in this game, I think, is if one team is getting a hiding. I think that's the only thing that's really going to make it happen, because it's just far too high intensity a game for him to really come on and have some sort of influence in. So, you know, I think he'll just be there for decoration, really. And Federico Valverde will continue to play at right back as he had recently. Now, I guess the two things we've got to factor in is, firstly, Federico Valverde playing at right back was not great for them in this game last season. And, you know, so much focus in this country particularly has been on Alexander-Arnold going back to Anfield. We should be looking at Xabi Alonso going back to Anfield again, which he did for the first time as a coach last season when Bayer Leverkusen thumped there 4-0. And Real Madrid themselves gave an even worse performance, I think, in their 2-0 defeat at Anfield. Of course, that Liverpool of last autumn is not Liverpool of this autumn. I think it's fair to say. Of course. So two slightly different things, although they were clearly trying to go back to basics against Aston Villa last night. But look, the fact that Real Madrid have turned up in a couple of big matches, particularly El Clasico. It felt as if they'd learned from that first game against proper opposition when they lost heavily in the Madrid derby to Atletico. So I guess we get to see if Real Madrid really have learned something from that, and if Real Madrid really can compete in this competition, which, you know, they weren't really able to do meaningfully last year. They were sort of there, but no, not quite there last season.
No. Well, they're taking this. I mean, obviously, any trip to Anfield in any competition for any team, it's a tricky thing. They're taking it very seriously. Secret training sessions, Andy. No spies, no drones.
Yeah. As Xabi Alonso said in his press conference, I just feel happier at Valdebebas, which is their training ground, behind closed doors rather than having 500 cameras facing us. I really couldn't have been more honest about it, to be fair. But yeah, maybe he's got a plan, or maybe he just fancies 5 minutes peace and quiet.
Yes, and now the story that I think have probably got you licking your lips, and I don't know where the source this is, but it is doing the rounds, is that you know, their teenage superstar Endrick, they need to get some more first team minutes into his leg somewhere. The possibility, Andy, being that great developer of Brazilian talent, Leon.
The strong possibility, it seems, that they're in talks, player and two clubs already, and it looks like it might even get tied up in the near future for him to come across in January. Now, look, this is a big deal for Endrick. He has to get the move right, because at the moment he's not playing at all, not a minute. So he needs to play if he's going to get to the World Cup with Brazil. Of course, Leon have had no money to go and buy a striker, having sold Jorge Mikatadze, and there is the Brazilian connection there. It's something that's huge in Leon history. And of course, Real Madrid and Leon have a brilliant relationship dating back to when there was that deal between Jean-Michel Aulas and Florentino Perez to bring Karim Benzema to the Bernabeu in 2009, and what a historic moment that was. So what a story it would be if Endrick were to fire Leon back into European football in the second half of the season.
Yeah, what fun to see him playing in French football as well. Absolutely. Listen, that's all from Mbappe Watch. As I say, Liverpool against Real Madrid Tuesday is an absolute mouthwaterer. There are so many more Champions League games that deserve equal attention. Not all of them involving the English teams. Let's be honest, one or two rather how shall I put it, staid-looking ties there. But if you say that, there's that game at Anfield plus PSG against Bayern, how delicious is that? I'll let you know which games you can hear here on talkSPORT Network in just a little while. Up next, though, we're going to expand into the rest of Spain and talk about what's happening in their football. After some bombshell revelations, Mary Earps will join Leanne Sanderson on talkSPORT's women's football show tomorrow. They'll chat about what really went down before the Euros, Mary's decision to retire, and what a relationship with Hannah Hampton is like now. That's the women's football show on talkSPORT 2 from 7 p.m. tomorrow night, or you can hear it as a podcast on the talkSPORT app. To Spain now, everybody, where our headline is Barcelona hoping to keep their rash. Speculation rising, Andy, that far from extending his loan, Barcelona want to make Marcus Rashford a proper Barca player.
Yeah, they're going to make an honest man of him, it seems, and not just ask him to commit to another year's loan, which I've always suspected would be the case for obvious financial reasons. I mean, look, in terms of what he's actually produced while he's there, it's a no-brainer to want to keep him. He's been absolutely brilliant. I think he's been allowed a little bit more latitude by the fact that Rafinha's been injured and has been a regular face in the crowd or on the sidelines, starting argy-bargy after El Clasico. But look, Rashford has fitted in really well. Hansi Flick's very pleased with him. He got another great goal, terrific finish, left-footed from an angle to see off the game against Elche, which they eventually won 3-1. Elche, tougher opposition than they might seem on paper. And they have Iñaki Peña, the former Barcelona goalkeeper in goal, who had a really good game today, I thought. And look, he's clicking with their best players. He's clicking with Lamine Yamal. He's clicking really well with Firmino as well. And Barca look like they're going to score goals with Marcus Rashford in the team. It's that simple. That takes him up in all competitions to 7 and 5 assists, which they're very pleased with. Now, look, I think the mutual happiness of the relationship so far is very important. The fact that there is interest in Rashford, clearly, especially with a view to England and the World Cup next summer, in how he's doing over here. But it does feel maybe from his perspective that there's enough distance for him just to be able to get his head down and get on with the game without sort of, I guess, microscopic levels of attention. And clearly working with Hansi Flick is a real bonus. And you look at it and what Barcelona have got, they've got an option which is thought to be around 35 million euros. As we've underlined, Barcelona don't have tons of money. But I think when you bear in mind that they could amortise that over the length of a contract, that they are planning to give Rashford another pay cut, if he will accept it. Obviously, he's already taken a pay cut to go there, but he is speaking their language, and I don't mean Catalan. And I think that the plan is that they'll give him a longer contract with the same sort of money that he's getting at the moment. So, it works out to be spread over a longer period of time, which is how they would make it work financially. And look, long may it continue. It's good for England. It's good for him, and we want to see him doing his stuff.
No, he's been really good for them, and as you say, all kinds of things. He has been given some space by Rafinha's absence, but also the expectation of him is slightly altered by the fact that Lamine Yamal is supposed to lead the team, even though he's still doing his school homework. So it's a really good situation for Marcus Rashford. It's just that going from an economically a very healthy club like Manchester United to one which is hobbled like Barcelona. I know they'll work it out. They will. It'll be the same amount of money over a longer contract. But pay cuts, they never sit well with people, do they? Particularly not when you're doing very, very well.
No, they don't. But I guess, Danny, the thing to always point out about footballers, and please, if you're a footballer and I'm completely wrong about this, feel free to text or ring in. But it always feels to me when you talk to footballers and when you talk to people around footballers that it's not actually the exact poundage or euro-ish that matters. It's not the money, it's the respect it conveys. And actually, if you are taking a bit of a pay cut to play for Barcelona, you're playing for Barcelona. That affords you incredible status amongst your peers. And already it feels like he's getting healthier, even if he might be taking a little bit of a financial hit for it.
Andy, well, again, not to disagree with you, my friend, but it's one of the great luxuries enjoyed by elite footballers, isn't it? You can talk very openly about how it isn't about the money, while your agent gets you the best deal any human being has ever experienced. So don't come that old twaddle with me, Andy. Let's talk about the game between Atletico Madrid. I think improving Atletico and Seville. It was at 0-0 for a long time, but in the end, Atletico's a very, very deep pool of players, and particularly the emerging brilliance of the manager's son, overcame Seville.
Yeah, it did, and it took him like nearly 65 minutes to break through against the Sevilla side that you and I have always suspected is just not that good, despite the fact they beat Barcelona and had earlier in the season and had a good start to the season. And they were put in their place eventually by a better resourced and just a better team, really, at the Metropolitano yesterday. Now, look, I think the way that they broke through was really impressive, and the way that they saw the game off once they got in front was impressive as well. But it was all about resources. You had Julian Alvarez opening the scoring from the penalty spot. And then almost immediately after that, they brought on Thiago Almada and Conor Gallagher. And if you're Sevilla, you're thinking, oh, come on, have a heart here. And they really polished it off really well. With the second goal from Almada, the third from Antoine Griezmann after he missed an absolute sitter just before that. And I think we're seeing with Diego Simeone at the moment, because they've had two such big transfer windows, he's still getting used to that, two such big last summer transfer windows, that he's still getting used to the squad and the resources that he had. Like recently, I got a new car. It was my first new car in 12 years. And it takes you a while to work out how to make the most of all the facilities on it. Like his cars have a little screen on now, and they have like parking assist, and you know, they have entertainment that you can do without sort of trying to get the aux to fit in your phone for 10 minutes and all that sort of stuff. So that's what Simeone's been trying to do for the last year, I suppose. And I feel like he's using the subs better and better. Now, of course, you do feel that the baton is passing from Griezmann, even though Koke has been superb. It's not about those old guys anymore. And Julian Alvarez, clearly we thought for a while it's going to be his team. They had the headline King Julian, obviously, in Marca today. But I thought, you know what? I wonder if it's a little bit more about the other Julian, or King Giuliano, maybe. Giuliano Simeone, the youngest of the Simeone sons, who's been in the team for, well, the second season now. He was brilliant in this. Great assist for the Thiago Almada goal. And in terms of tempo, pressing, energy, wit, he's so important. It was interesting because he was being asked about it after the game. And he said, well, you know, we just have, me and my father just have the same relationship as any player and coach. It's different at home, but here it's just, you know, he doesn't have to say hello to me if he doesn't want it. It's fine. Not fussed about that. But he said, I really believe in his vision of football, which is working until you've got nothing left, leaving everything out there on the pitch and trying to win at the expense of anything, which I thought was really nice.
Listen, Andy, well, then let's turn our attention to the Basque derby between Real Sociedad and Athletic Bilbao. We'll talk about Athletic later when we preview when they go to St James's Park on Wednesday. But a good win and perhaps a slightly unexpected win for Real Sociedad, but 3-2 against their local rivals.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about how Athletic have been hot and cold this season, mainly cold, I think it's fair to say. But I just wondered if because of their poor form, it would be really tight. And it was the exact opposite, actually. 3-2 win in which Real Sociedad led 3 times. And there were just moments where you thought, yeah, this is when Real Sociedad can really be on it. And I suppose Gonzalo Guedes, who's there at the moment, having been at Wolves, back at Benfica, now at Real Sociedad, his goal, the second goal, which was just such a sublime piece of skill, the way he controlled it, brought it under his spell, and then outside of the foot finish to put Real Sociedad back in front. And I remember when he first came into La Liga with Valencia, you know, he looked like on his day, like one of the best players in the division who Real Madrid or Barcelona would definitely want. Now, we know now that he's not that consistent, but on his day, he can be something really, really special. We have to have a word for John Godoechi as well, who scored his first ever goal for the club in stoppage time to get it won. And, you know, they say it's a friendly derby, but they look pretty pleased to win it to me.
Yeah, they would do. My star of the week in Spain is a lovely story. Oscar Mingueza, he was a Barcelona Academy product and then went to Celta, where the departure of Rafa Benitez has liberated him, playing in a kind of right back or right midfield role. And how many people, I think, Andy, you said this to me when we were preparing the show, go from Barcelona to Celta and then go to, not the other way around, but then get in the Spanish squad. It's exactly what Oscar has done. They beat Levante today, and he scored the first and made the second. So Oscar Mingueza, whose career is blossoming, is my star of the week in Spain. Who is yours?
Well, look, I know you're bored of 5'7", 5'8" little geniuses from Spain, but I'm not. So I'm going to go for Alberto Molero, who came across from Las Palmas to Villarreal this summer. He just couldn't leave the yellow behind. And he had a brilliant game as they beat Rayo Vallecano 4-0 yesterday. Scored the second goal. Lovely cut in from the left-hand side and curling shot with the right. He was just a little prince, Las Palmas, and you wondered whether he could make the step up. It really looks like he could now, and a team that's got a lot of attacking weapons. They've had a great start to the season and they're third.
Okay, listen, thank you for that. Next, we're going to spend the next half an hour looking at the Champions League fixtures that are coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday. And we'll start in a few minutes' time with that whole raft of English teams, some of whom have got very winnable-looking games. We'll talk about all of those next here on TransEurope Express. As you've no doubt been hearing, it's our biggest competition yet, and time is now running out. Under 1 week to go until lines close for your chance to play to win up to £100,000. That's £100,000 completely tax-free. If you're the lucky winner, getting the call this Thursday, you'll be heading to talkSPORT Towers on Thursday the 13th of November to play for all that life-changing cash. Here's how to enter, and good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, text the word cash to 83338 and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or you can enter for free by calling 0330 880 3338. All entries must be received by the 6th of November at 4 p.m. This is a talkSPORT limited promotion run on talkSPORT, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Yeah, thanks for all of that. Andy, let's turn our attention then to the English teams. We've already talked about Liverpool and Real Madrid. Let's motor through the remaining 5 English teams in the Champions League. I suppose the biggest game, clearly, is Manchester City against Dortmund. City in pretty good form, Erling Haaland in phenomenal form, but Dortmund in brilliant form themselves in the Champions League.
Yeah, you caught me on the hop there. I was expecting Spurs Copenhagen when you were talking about.
We'll get on. Let's call this the Lord's Mayor show, and Spurs and Copenhagen are something else. Yeah,
it always feels like it's destiny, as you were saying to me earlier, Danny, that Erling Haaland's just going to completely unload on Dortmund. And, be fairly polite about it. I think it's fair to say. Clearly, he's having a great start to the season, and I think a huge part of what Dortmund are able to do really depends how they are fitness-wise, because Nico Schlotterbeck had the flu and couldn't play at Augsburg on Friday. The extra day might do them a little bit good. Hopefully for them, he'll be in nick to face Erling Haaland, because really one of the best defenders in the Bundesliga and the best striker, the best number 9 on the planet. It'll be a really interesting matchup between them. But elsewhere, it does feel as if City are there to be got at, certainly at a Champions League level. And bear in mind, as you were saying there, the fact that Dortmund have got out of the blocks fantastically well in the Champions League. 2 wins and a draw, and they should have won the one that they drew, because they were 4-2 up against Juventus going into the second, third minute of stoppage time. But 4-2 at Juventus, they were leading. As we said, they've scored 4 goals in each of these games. They're absolutely free scoring, no matter who they put out there. They're not solely reliant on Seru Guirassy for goals like they were last season. They've got different ways of getting you open, and I think different ways of opening you up in midfield as well. So I think it'll be a really, really interesting game, and quite a few goals in it.
Yeah, equally interesting will be the game exchanges part between Newcastle and Athletic Bilbao. 2 clubs who both got flaws, Andy. So I'm looking forward to the game hugely. Yeah,
and I think there's at least part of me that wants to argue that Newcastle have played better than the results have been. And I think that's fair if you look at some of those games, maybe not necessarily at West Ham today. But Athletic are a team that have underachieved compared to what they're capable of, having got back in the Champions League, as you say, just like Newcastle. I think it would be a bit of a fib to say that they had played better than the results have been. You look at them marooned there in mid-table in La Liga after losing that game at Real Sociedad. Now, you think in the derby it was La Real who really needed the result in that, and given that they were looking over their shoulder to the relegation zone, well, yeah, they did need that win, but Athletic really needed it as well. And the way they managed the game, I thought was quite poor. Not just the concession of that late winner, but the fact that they let in the opening goal when sending on a player to pick up the runner who was still limping from the challenge that he'd been injured in. It was a bit ridiculous. Hardy Gazar couldn't really keep up with his runner. So I think you look at that and it just all feels a little bit disjointed at the moment. It felt that win against Karabakh in the last round of the Champions League would sort them out, and that they were back on an even keel, and the fact that Nico Williams was returning. But it's not been that at all. They still look kind of a mess, and I think this is a great opportunity for Newcastle to get them now.
We know about the restrictions they have on their recruitment, but they just don't have a centre forward. Andy, now look, everyone knows I think you're great, and that's why you were a house guest here last week. But other editors and producers, they really don't like you at all. So on Tuesday, you're doing Spurs against Copenhagen.
I'm looking forward to it, and it feels like Spurs are going to have some sort of reaction after this weekend.
Well, that's what I thought after the Newcastle game.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of putting it right at home, this is something that they really need to do. And of course, they had such a brilliant start at home in the Champions League, scoring that early goal against Villarreal. And from there, it's just been a bit underwhelming. Like, the results are fine. I mean, to take 5 points from the first 3 games is fine, but they're a bit lucky to get a point in both Bodo Glimt and Monaco, in which Vicario had a brilliant game, of course, in the latter of those. So I feel against the Copenhagen team that has plenty of expectation itself. I mean, you know, we might look at Danish football and think, what can you realistically expect? Well, the fact is, in recent years, FC Copenhagen have really changed their image and their self-image, really, because, of course, they were perennial champions of the Danish Super League. That's not so much the case now. And in terms of other teams being able to develop and recondition players, you look at Midtjylland, you look at Nordsjælland and their academy and the players they've got over from Africa and how well it's worked. Copenhagen have to have a bit of a rethink. And what they've tried to do is make themselves this sort of, I guess, pan-Scandinavian hub for talent. It's how they developed Rooney Bajaji, who, of course, has now gone off to Barcelona. And that's their plan going forward. So they have this really interesting mix of super experienced players and ones that they're trying to bring through. For them, the biggest blow was losing Victor Froholt at the start of the season to Porto, where he's been really great so far, even if he took a bit of an education from Elliot Anderson in that game at Nottingham Forest the last time out that I was at. They're only 4th in the league so far, and still they're just a little bit unsure about what they are and where they are. So look, this is a great opportunity for Spurs, and they have to make the most of it.
They do. They're North London rivals, if that's the correct word just now. They go to Slavia Prague, Andy, who I must admit I know nothing about. Do Slavia have anything that can help resist what looks like an Arsenal juggernaut just now, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty impossible to stop Arsenal, no matter who you are at the moment.
Exactly, yeah.
But Slavia, as you say, but Slavia Prague have 2 big things in their favour. Firstly, I think the atmosphere, which will be raucous, that should help them. The other thing is, as well, not only are they unbeaten in the league this season, but they went and got a draw at Atalanta last time out. And, you know, I guess you might say simply everyone's drawing with Atalanta at the moment. But having said that, it's still a great result for them to go out there and ride that out pretty well and keep a clean sheet in Bergamo. It's not to be sniffed at all. So if there's anything to take from that will be it, that they've got something to build on, that they're an ambitious, well-funded club. They're looking to make that top 24. So look, anything they get off Arsenal is an absolute bonus, the way that Arsenal are playing at the moment. But, you know, they've got a good sense of self, and yeah, I guess that's what they've got. No.
There are always going to be ties like this, but the way the league has been reconfigured, there were when it was 4-team groups. There's always one team who you think, well, the difference in resources is so enormous here. Karabag, you could argue, have a resource gap with Chelsea as well. But the trip to Baku, I mean, I know Chelsea won the Europa League there, but the trip to Baku, just because the distance involved, already makes this a very, very tricky fixture.
When you say Chelsea won the Europa League there, you made it sound as if some of them thought, oh, it's such a long trip, I might just stay here. I might just set up home here now. But it's in terms of the easier teams, it's the one that no one wants, because it is such a long trip, because it will definitely affect the way they play in the Premier League next weekend, unless they leave half their players at home. So it's interesting to see how it will pan out. The other thing we have to say is Karabag have been excellent in the Champions League so far. Won the opening 2 games, really could have won in Bilbao against Athletic last time out. They took the lead in the first minute. Leandro Andrade, who's been brilliant in these games so far, really, really impressed with him. And I could see him getting a move to, I guess, a more watched European league. They were leading for 40 minutes in that game against a team that is obviously a lot better and a better resource than them, but looked really unconfident for a lot of that time. So look, they could be sitting here on 9 points. They're not to be trifled with at all. Of course, you would expect Chelsea to close them out, especially over the duration. And we think of the physical power of the Premier League teams, and that will no doubt have an effect. But the way that Karabag managed to come on strong, particularly if you go back to that first game against Benfica, where they were 2-0 down early on, managed to stay in the game and managed to physically stay with Benfica to polish them off and really go for the game in the dying stages, was really, really impressive. And of course, it finished off Bruno Lage and ushered in the new Jose Mourinho era at Benfica.
Listen, thank you for all of that, Andy. We'll come back in a few seconds' time and talk about some of the games not involving English teams in the Champions League, including a game that could easily be a rehearsal for the final, with all due respect to other teams, when Paris Saint-Germain play host to Bayern Munich. It's not even bonfire night there in England. in Britain, so it's stupid to talk about possible finals for the Champions League. As Paris Saint-Germain showed last season, anything can happen with their poor start to the tournament. By the end of it, they were an irresistible force. Having said all that, anybody who follows European football closely knows that Tuesday night's game between Paris Saint-Germain and Bayern Munich in Paris could easily be the final of the Champions League come May. Andy, we'll look at some other games, but that's the one that's just roaring off the page at you. The result, because of the format, it's not the big thing here. It's how these teams square up to each other. And I'll ask you this question. Having rested their brilliant forward line this weekend, Bayern Munich appear to be one of the teams who have at least the physical power to try and face off the skill and speed of Paris Saint-Germain.
Yeah, they do, Danny. And look, there are some medium-term questions about Bayern, the fullbacks being one of them. Do they have good enough fullbacks, and are they strong enough in those positions to go the distance? But I think daring to rest players for ostensibly pretty big matches, and certainly like Leverkusen is one of the biggest games of the season on paper. At least we talked about the issues that Leverkusen have got at the moment.
Sure.
But for Vincent Kompany to dare to leave out Harry Kane, which, let's face it, at least one of his previous coaches wouldn't have, and just say this is what
nor any England coach as well, since we're at it. Yeah,
exactly. And to say that this is right for the team, and like, if we have got a smaller squad, let's be careful and let's look after ourselves this season. I think there is a sense that the players are totally bought into that as well, even senior players. And we talked about ego management earlier in the show. You know, this has always been a big deal at Bayern. And this has been something that a lot of people around Bayern feel that Kompany has excelled in. Like really making it a little bit like Xabi Alonso at Real Madrid, even if they have slightly different philosophies, made it about it being a collective effort, no egos, no strops, and really to keep a lid on that sort of thing at a club like Bayern Munich is generally thought of as quite impossible. And Kompany's done it really, really well. And it's led to the board really heavily trusting him. And that's what's led to his contract extension. I don't just think winning the league has got him the contract extension, or getting to the quarterfinals of the Champions League has got him that extension. It's the content and it's the atmosphere that he's created at the club. Now, bear in mind, at the start of this season, if we start with the DFB Super Cup, DFL Super Cup, which of course is the equivalent, the Franz Beckenbauer Super Cup of the Community Shield.
Yeah.
If you count that and then beating Stuttgart in that, which they did ever so comfortably, they've won all 15 official games that they played.
Amazing.
It's an incredible start, and it doesn't feel like they're letting up. And if you look at them and PSG as well, 13 goals and 12 goals respectively in the Champions League so far. Look, if I wasn't talking, I'd be licking my lips right now. In fact, I think I am talking and licking my lips right now. Yeah. This is going to be a fantastic game. I can't wait.
Yeah, and it'll be, and again, as I say, because the result is not quite as jeopardous, if no such word exists, as it would have been if it was in a 4-team group. It's still a chance for these teams to measure themselves against each other. And you're absolutely right. Bayern recognised that by leaving out their superstar forward line for this game. Another game I want to do is also Tuesday, and I need you to preview for us, is Napoli, who are under Conte, I think, still, of course, they're champions in Italy, but they're still, I think, improving all the time, incrementally. And they take on Eintracht Frankfurt.
Remarkably, Danny, they're still top, despite a lot having gone on in the last fortnight. Look, this is an absolutely huge game for them after the 6-2 defeat against PSV in the last round. And they really need a result from this. There's no doubt about that. I don't think they've been massively impressive in any of their Champions League games. Of course, there were reasons behind why they lost at City, and Giovanni Di Lorenzo going off early on was a big factor in that. I didn't think they were great when they beat Sporting, the Diego Maradona in the second game. So they need to make something happen in this. And Eintracht Frankfurt as well, who are a team with a very attacking nature, who've scored a lot of goals and conceded a lot of goals so far this season. They're ever so leaky. I think you look at this and think that there are going to be goals, and they need to go for it, because they've won their first game 5-1 against Galatasaray and lost the subsequent 5-1 to Atletico and Liverpool. I think Rasmus Højlund being fit again is absolutely huge. He was back in the team this weekend as they played Como, and Como played them really well, actually. Fabregas is developing a pace as a coach, as European sporting directors all over the place are aware of. And it took a penalty save by Vanja Milinkovic-Savic, who's been ever so busy since he came into the Napoli team, from Alvaro Morata to get Napoli a point in the end. So Napoli not in the greatest place. Conte is, I think if we're talking about the Conte scale of combustibility, is probably about 7 so far. So that tells you the level of stress that there is. We're not talking about Spurs away at Southampton just yet, but we'll save that for maybe February or March. But he's very, very irritable at the moment. And of course, the other factor about this is there'll be no Eintracht Frankfurt fans there, because it was considered by the local authorities as a high-risk game. And it will be, I think, the 15th game in UEFA club competition over the last 3 years that's had no away fans at it. So I guess it puts into perspective what happened with Maccabi Tel Aviv fans not being allowed at Aston Villa.
Okay, and Jose Mourinho's in the Champions League, of course. Benfica need to get going in the Champions League, Andy, and Leverkusen need to arrest their own not slightly, but disintegrating form.
Well, that's it. I mean, look, we know they're a developing team under Kasper Hjulmand, and there's a lot of talent there. Because they won 4 successive games in the Bundesliga, I think it was easy to say, oh, okay, they're on the up and up. And Serge Gnabry even said, oh yeah, Leverkusen are coming. It's easy to say that after your half-reserve team has beaten them 3-0, I think. And, it's the Sir Alex Ferguson tactic of, giving teams that are no threat to you a little pat on the head, I suppose.
Praising that your victims as they lie bleeding at your feet,
Yeah, that's exactly it. And look, I think to expect them to go deep into the Champions League is a bit much, but they could really do with making the top 24, not least from a financial perspective of getting into the playoffs. But look, they haven't been super impressive so far. They were absolutely hammered last time out by decent opposition in Paris Saint-Germain, and they had bits of that game. But then in the bits where PSG really got after them, they completely folded. A 7-2 defeat, of course, which is pretty difficult to get over. So yeah, they need something from this.
Yeah, and Jose will be plotting the way he always does. We've got an amazing last hour of the show for you. Tim Vickery will join us from South America, where we now know the finalists in the Copa America, and at least one of those games was extraordinary. And then we'll be joined by Brendan Madden, who has written a book called Once Upon a Time in La Liga, Spanish Football's Forgotten Tales. Really enjoyable book about, it's not all about Barcelona and Real Madrid. Andy will discuss that with him, but some really good highways and byways from the history of Spanish football. We'll also be looking at the outstanding ties left for us in the Europa League and the Conference League, including Rangers against Roma. And then Andy will take you around the leagues as well. So there's still a load to get through in this final hour of TransEurope Express, which is coming up very, very soon after we get some news and sport headlines for you.
would have thought a sporting event's halftime show could have a bigger impact than the game itself. Well, the Super Bowl halftime show does exactly that. In 2024, Usher brought in an audience of 180 million worldwide, the biggest ever in the event's history. But how did singing and dancing get to be the centerpiece of America's biggest sporting event? The first edition of the Super Bowl was held in 1967, when the Green Bay Packers beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Los Angeles. Because of the sheer size of the event, organisers wanted to put on entertainment at halftime for the fans in the stadium. It was a display of marching bands, dancers and pure USA patriotism, and that was the theme that followed for years. In the 1980s, the Walt Disney Company got involved and we started seeing some interesting and questionable displays. But we got our first glimpse of halftime shows to come in '93, when none other than Michael Jackson stunned fans with his 15-minute medley of his own smash hits. When he walked out on stage, he had to wait for the crowd's cheers to die down for about 2 minutes before even starting his first song. Diana Ross, Gloria Estefan, Phil Collins all starred in their own shows, as did Aerosmith, who performed alongside NSYNC. Things got a little bit out of hand in 2004 when Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson produced perhaps the most famous or infamous wardrobe malfunction in history. Shows from the likes of Prince, Lady Gaga and Beyoncé are considered by critics as the best. To give you an idea of the scale of things, Rihanna's 2023 halftime show included roughly 800 people. These ranged from backing dancers to stage crew to camera operatives broadcasting to millions around the world. The whole stage for that show was built in roughly 8 minutes and was broken down and cleared away in the same time. The acts perform for free nowadays, even though the experts reckon it costs around $13 million to put on Rihanna's show. Artists know they'll rocket up the charts in the following weeks. Rihanna's average sales improved by 140% in the months following her performance. The Super Bowl halftime show will be a fixture in pop culture for years to come. So the question is, who next?
Yeah, welcome back one, welcome back all to the third and final hour of this edition of TransEurope Express. I'm Danny Kelly. Andy Brassell is here with me as always, though not quite as physically near to me as he was last week in our universally admired show live here from Kilkenny. We've got a lot to get through in this final 60 minutes. Brendan Madden will join us very soon to talk about his new book, Spanish Football's Forgotten Tales. And after that, Andy will take us through a whole raft of great fixtures in the Europa League and the Conference League, and then he'll take us around the remainder of the leagues we haven't so far concentrated on, including a quite extraordinary win for the bottom team in the Netherlands. All of that will be preceded by Tim Vickery. Welcome one, welcome all, welcome back to TransEurope Express. Yes, regular listeners, and that's millions of you, I know, will know that 11 o'clock means we have to go and talk to our South American correspondent, our friend and our czar, if you like, Tim Vickery. Good evening, Tim.
Evening, gentlemen. Last week, were you more Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway back together again, or were you Peaches and Herbs reunited?
I don't know. It was just an incredibly nice weekend. Andy's family came. I mean, I didn't invite them, but they came anyway, you know. And in what I would call a freeloading special. But it turns out they were lovely as well, which was kind of annoying, yeah. They were great, and we loved doing the show together. Me downstairs, him upstairs. And we had a little reunion, since you mentioned Peaches and Herb, at the very end, where Andy rushed on the downstairs as I was doing the outro, and appeared, for those of you, the millions of you watching on television devices these days. We were in the same room together, despite the protestations of insurance companies worldwide. Tim, the Libertadores is, after all, going to be an all-Brazilian final, which covers up for one of the great comebacks. I mean, that bland statement covers one of the great comebacks in South American football.
Yeah, you say so, but I thought of the two Brazilian sides, I always thought, I told you this time last week, it was the other one who had the harder task. Not Palmeiras, who lost the first leg 3-0 to Liga of Quito, LDU. I always thought they were going to do it for a number of reasons. One, Liga, I've seen a lot of them this season, including, I've seen them in the stadium a few times. They're not particularly good. They got that far by not conceding a lot of goals, and by the Palmeiras coach making an absolute mess of his selection for the first leg when they were 3-0 down at half time. Now, you're at altitude. You're 3-0 up at half time if you're Liga de Quito. What do you do in the second half? You go out to kill the game.
Yeah, kill the tie.
They sat on it. They sat on it, partly because they're not great, but also because they're an ageing side. And in stoppage time, they lost, straight red card, the one player with a little bit of pace, Ramirez, who would give them a kind of escape valve. So you knew, second leg, they haven't got any pace up front. They haven't got any counter-attack. Palmeiras will be able to camp themselves in the Ecuadorians' half and just turn the screw. I don't actually think they played particularly well, but they got the 4 goals that they needed. On the 5th anniversary of Abel Ferreira, their Portuguese coach, of his reign with Palmeiras. Now, 5 years in Brazil is a long, long time. It's almost unheard of for a coach to stay 5 years. And now he's got a final to look forward to, and it is the classic final. It's the two strongest teams in South America over the last 6 or 7 years, because they will face Flamengo. Now, Flamengo of Rio had won their first leg against Racing of Argentina 1-0. Now, that's a slim lead to take into Racing Stadium, which, did they stage a party, a real party. But, and again, you have the problem of the financial gap between the two sides. Racing haven't got a lot, apart from, it's a lovely Welsh word, without any vowels. Hoyle. Have you ever come across this?
Yeah,
watching
cool,
rugby.
Yeah.
Hoyle. All it means is kind of wave your shooting stick and get up there and get at them, and that's all Racing had. Charge. There's not a lot of class, not a lot of quality there. Flamengo played from 10 minutes in the second half with a man down. They had a man sent off, and they still managed to hold on for the 0-0 draw. You look at the Flamengo lineup, the starting 11. 6 non-Brazilians, plus Jorginho, late of Chelsea and Arsenal, who, of course, his footballing nationality is Italian. And on the bench, you've got Saúl, the Spaniard, plus Brazilian internationals of great experience, such as Danilo and Emerson Royal. It shouldn't really be close. It was close, but it shouldn't have been, really, looking at the economic gap between the two sides. So after months and months and months, all the way back to early the first week in February, and a grand total of 154 games, we've ended up with the final that we always thought we were going to have.
So, Tim, to go to Brazilian domestic matters, which kind of involve the same teams, it could be a really interesting end to the season, because you have this big final coming up between Flamengo and help me out here. Palmeiras, thank you very much. Because they were celebrating this week in Portugal the 5 years of Abel at Palmeiras, and there are a few media sort of compilations on it. But they're battling it out for the league as well. And the second part I wanted to ask you about that is the other team that were getting in my head just then and could be involved, although they're a little bit further behind and they played a game more, a Cruzeiro. Now, when Danny and I were talking earlier about possible Lusophone candidates for the Wolves job, now Vitor Pereira's gone, thoughts on Leonardo Jardim as an outsider?
Perhaps he's done a terrific job at Cruzeiro, really terrific job, but he's also said he's not going to coach any other team in Brazil, and I don't think he's going to be here for very long. He's found it a little bit of a strain just with the calendar, the amount of games. So possibly, in his low-key, thoroughly unamused by anything way, he's done a terrific job because he walked into a difficult situation. They'd spent money on signings, on big signings, who you thought they're not going to work. And the first thing he did was liberated themselves. Two massive signings. He picked his side without them. Now that needed a pair of stones to do that. Dudu, who'd come from Palmeiras, and Gabriel Barbosa, who'd come from Flamengo. So Dudu's already shipped off, and Gabriel has spent the whole year on the bench. So right from the start, he established his own independent line, and results have borne him out. It doesn't look like they're going to win the title, and he keeps saying that they're not going to win the title. They're 5 points off with having played a game more. But it is going to be fascinating because and Flamengo and Palmeiras, this final on November the 29th, it's set for Lima. The Brazilian in Peru, the Brazilian FA will try and move it to Brazil. I kind of hope that they don't get their way simply because I met someone yesterday who's already bought his ticket to Lima. And he said that, how much the direct flights were from from Rio to Lima? It was something like £1,200. He managed to find an alternative route, which was about 600 quid. So if they change the venue at this late time, the amount of people who've shelled out that kind of money are going to struggle to get it back. But anyway, it's a historic final. It will mean that Brazil have won for 7 times in a row. It's never happened before. It will bring Brazil level with Argentina on 25 wins each. And whoever wins will also become the first Brazilian team to win the Libertadores 4 times.
Wow.
A possible problem is that these two teams, they just cannot relax because they are going toe-to-toe for the Brazilian title with 8 games to go. It looks as if Palmeiras will finish this round 1 point ahead. They're 2-0 up in their game at the moment with under 20 to go. And so they're kind of playing every Wednesday and every weekend, You wonder if tiredness and injuries and so on are going to be a factor in the final. Because usually in Brazilian football, you kind of have to choose. There's so many games and so much travelling that you have to establish your priority. But in this case, they can't. They really can't. They both really want to win the Libertadores and they both really want to win the domestic league. So there is just a chance, perhaps, if Flamengo and Palmeiras slip up because of an accumulation of games and just take their foot off the pedal in the league, there is a little chance that Leo Jardim can overtake them. But as I say, I don't think he's going to be here for very long.
So you said that about Jardim, and it feels all very sort of epochal, like it's building towards a huge moment for all the protagonists. If you had to take those top 3 coaches, Jardim, I know what you think about his future, but also Abel, who's been there for a very long time by Brazilian standards, and Felipe Luis, who's on the come up at Flamengo. Do you think all of those 3 coaches will be coaching in Europe next season?
I'm not sure necessarily about next season, but soon, without doubt. I mean, I don't know how long Abel will want to keep going at Palmeiras, and there is an exhaustion of so long. And if they win, and remember, the winner of the Libertadores goes straight into the Intercontinental afterwards. Whether they can still walk, I don't know. This happened to Botafogo last year. They won the league, they won the Libertadores, and then they had to fly straight off for the Intercontinental and got hammered by a side from Mexico just because they weren't in any physical condition whatsoever. It can't go on forever. With Abel, so maybe I think Flamengo will try and keep hold of him for a little while longer. Jardim might want a Libertadores campaign next year. I don't know, but in the long run, I think all roads lead to Europe for all of them.
Tim, and finally, and I'm afraid briefly, if you can, we now know the finalists as well of the Sudamericana, the equivalent of the Europa League.
Yes, we do, and it's a Brazil versus Argentina final. Atlético Mineiro of Brazil and Lanús of Argentina, 2 European coaches, or Argentine coaches with European experience, with a point to prove. And Jorge Sampaoli, 10 years ago, was his finest hour with Chile winning the Copa America. He's been on the down for a while. Can he come back? On the other hand, the coach of Lanús, Mauricio Pellegrino, once in the Premier League with Liverpool and with Southampton, who's been coaching for a while but hasn't won a title yet. So it's a huge occasion for both of them. That one will be taking place a week earlier than Libertadores, November the 22nd, in Asunción, the capital of Paraguay.
Tim, as always, thank you, and wonderful to talk to you. Tim Vickery there. What would we do without him is the real question. And next, a man called Brendan Madden will join us, who's written a fascinating book with the title says it all, really. Once Upon a Time in La Liga, Spanish Football's Forgotten Tales. We'll be uncovering one or two of those forgotten tales next here on TransEurope Express. Yeah, now remember there's NFL action later this morning when you can listen to the Seattle Seahawks at the Washington Commanders live over on talkSPORT 2 after our show from just after midnight. That's live NFL on talkSPORT 2 from just after midnight. Now, we're going to talk about books now, football books, and it's my opportunity to congratulate my colleague Andy Brassell. I was banging on for the past year or so about his book We Play On, about Shakhtar Donetsk with the war, the illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine, all the rest of it. Well, very recently, the book has been translated into Japanese, and Andy's kind of keep a straight face, it has been awarded the prize for the best football book of the year in Japan. Well done, Andy.
I always knew I'd be big in Japan. Always.
Yeah, and you are. That's not to put any pressure on our next guest, who's himself written a lovely book. Brendan Madden joins us now. He's written a book called Once Upon a Time in La Liga, Spanish Football's Forgotten Tales. Good evening, Brendan.
Evening, gents. How you doing?
No pressure at all for the award-winning Andy Brassell.
Yeah, Andy will have to tell me how to get a Japanese publicist for it.
Oh, well, we brought a copy of the book, actually, to my wife, who collects books, and it's a beautiful thing, because, of course, they open right to left rather than left to right, as ours do, and it's a beautiful thing. Brendan, huge subject, Spanish football's forgotten tales. There's a lot of coverage of football, and Spain is front and centre much of that. Why did you decide to write this book? Yeah,
so I'd sort of been experimenting really with writing for a little while. I used to be in sort of the analytics side of Spanish football for a while, and when I left that world, I wanted to keep the connection with Spanish football, so I started sort of writing. And obviously, if you're new to it, there's probably nothing more boring than me sort of banging on about Barcelona transfer targets, etc. So I kind of found a sort of little niche of these sort of untold sort of historic Spanish football stories, really, and they sort of seem to get a little bit of traction. People seem to like them, and I sort of loved sort of researching them, digging around the archives and through newspapers and stuff, and got to a point where I sort of had enough of them where I thought it might make a sort of nice collection and a nice book.
Okay, and that's exactly what it's done. Let me ask you about, these are all, they're not obscure, these stories, but you say they're not marker headlines about Real. I'm talking to you, Brendan, from the Republic of Ireland, and so I was interested in Michael Robinson. People remember him as the Republic of Ireland centre forward. He also played for City and Brighton and Liverpool, of course. But after his playing days ended, he became a much bigger star in Spain than he'd ever been while being a professional footballer. He became a star media pundit. I know he passed away very much too young a few years ago, but he was an absolute superstar in Spanish football. How come?
Yeah, someone I got really fascinated with, because I was lucky enough, we used to have the sort of, in my office I used to work in, we used to have the TV and stuff like that. And when I was learning Spanish, he was actually one of the first ones I could really understand, because he was quite famous for speaking Spanish in a sort of quite an English accent. But yeah, it's always really hard to get across to people how massive he was there. I think the basic story is, he went to Osasuna at the sort of end of his career when his knees were sort of on the verge of giving out. Became a real sort of cult hero in Osasuna. He's a very brave number 9 sort of centre forward. Actually, his knees gave way. He gave way while he was there, and he actually had to sort of retire. He cancelled his contract, which he didn't want to take money that he couldn't play for, which made him very popular with the Osasuna fans. But he sort of worked his way into the media there and sort of became an absolutely huge star, really, really huge. And I've always. And the chapters are sort of a bit of a tribute to him, really, because he's always been a sort of hero of mine, and just also a way of just trying to get across how massive he was over there, how huge and how loved he was. I think there's one little vignette in there where I think it's an old story that Graham Souness used to say, that he was walking down the road with Michael Robinson and Sevi Ballesteros after lunch one day, and everyone came up to Michael Robinson to get his autograph, and hardly anyone went to poor old Sevi.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Brendan, it's beautifully written. It's beautifully told. I really enjoyed it. And I think that what people will feel when they're reading it is you can get really lost in some of these stories that are going to such depth, and they're so lovingly recounted, and there's so many bits of detail, even if you're someone who knows Spanish football well, because not only does it go beyond Real Madrid and Barcelona and latterly Atletico, but it demolishes some cliches. The one I really liked, actually, was I'm sure I'll come to the other ones that I like in a little bit, but the one I really liked is the story about Racing Santander and how they stood up against the Franco regime in the dying embers of that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's the sort of lead-off chapter, actually. Yeah, two incredible guys. So there's a winger, a winger from Valencia, from a Republican family in Valencia called Sergio Manzanera. He went to Racing in that summer of 1975. He immediately struck up this friendship with a Basque number 9 called Aitor Aguirre, obviously from a very sort of repressed sort of upbringing, shaken down by the police as a youngster, you know, all that sort of the classic sort of Franco repression tales of the Basque country. And so we're in that actual 50th anniversary territory because it's 50th anniversary of Franco's death coming up, and it was in that those sort of dying embers, as you said, Andy, of the regime, where they became a lot more repressive and they started using the death penalty a lot more. And the last time the death penalty was used in Spain was September 1975, and 5 people were executed on a Saturday morning, and that sort of news troubled Aitor and Sergio quite a lot, and they went out the next day and they just done something very, very humble, very simple, tied sort of bootlaces around their arms in form of black armbands. But they played the first half. Sergio set up a goal for Aitor, and they kind of thought no one had really noticed. But they went in at half time to the change rooms, and the tunnel was sort of stuffed with armed police. They had been very much noticed what they'd done. They got given an ultimatum to take them off then or be arrested. They decided to take them off. They thought they'd sort of made their point. They went out and won the game, but the next day they sort of had to go to court. They were fined. Their mail was tampered with. They had sort of death threats from extreme right-wing groups, and I think Aitor had to send his family back home to Bilbao, and Sergio, I think he said he sort of slept with a pistol under his pillow for the rest of the season. So amazing guys. I was lucky to sort of track them down and meet them both. And just like a lot of the stories in the book, it's kind of like just a massive pleasure to be able to sort of tell those stories to a new audience.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you for that. In my opinion, Johan Cruyff, apart from being one of the best 5 players I ever saw, probably in the top 3, I think he's the most important figure in football in the past 3 decades. It's his ideas, the Hungarian / Dutch ideas, through the prism of Johan Cruyff, become what we know at Barcelona, and all the rest of it. And yet, there's a part of your book, and I'd completely forgotten. I thought I knew every single. If I could talk about Johan Cruyff on Mastermind, but he had that spell late in his career, a few games for Levante.
Yeah, in the second division, bizarrely. So, and this was before he went back to Ajax and won the title, and obviously signed off with Feyenoord. But probably the weirdest 10 games of Cruyff's very, very famous career. Odd, and something that he often glosses over in his autobiography. There's exactly half a sentence devoted to his spell at Levante, but there's a lot more devoted to the reason why he ended up there, which was a disastrous pig farming investment. So
of course it was.
So he had a disastrous pig farming investment that he regrets getting involved in. When he left Barcelona, actually, there was a dispute where they wouldn't pay his tax bill. So he ended up looking for sort of quite novel ways to make money. And when he came back from America to Europe, he was eyeing up a few deals. But Levante sort of had this ambitious sort of, Paco Aznar was his name. He was a sort of ambitious, go-getting president who had big dreams, but not very great grip on sort of financial basics. But he came along at sort of the end of the season. It was meant to give them this brilliant push towards the end and push Levante up into Primera, and they'd already lined up these sort of tours of South America and North America and expansion of the fan base, etc. But it never really worked. He never quite clicked with his teammates, and it all sort of ended in ignominy, really. They failed to get promoted, and I think in Cruyff's last game, they sort of lost to a relegation-threatened team at home, and the fans were irate and ended up sort of chasing the president through some tennis courts. So it also a bit of a whimsical one. There's a lot of sort of weighty tales in there, but I quite like that one. It was there's a lot of sort of bizarre twists and turns in that bizarre
and
spell.
Brendan, I want to congratulate you on the book, but also on the fact that this programme, which does tend to follow its own course, and individual highways and byways sometimes become small tributaries and little lanes, but never had I expected to hear the phrase, some disastrous pig farm investments on the show. So congratulations again. Thank you very much. Brendan Madden there, whose book is called, I'll repeat it again, Once Upon a Time in La Liga, Spanish Football's Forgotten Tales. And it does, rather brilliantly, exactly what it says on the tin. We'll be going back to the competitive football in a second with Andy. Will take us through some of the big games in the Europa League and the Conference League too. Yeah, it's our biggest competition yet, and time is now running out. Under 1 week to go until lines close for your chance to play to win up to £100,000. Yep, £100,000 completely tax-free. And if you're the lucky winner getting the call this Thursday, you'll be heading to talkSPORT Towers on Thursday the 15th of November to play for that life-changing cash prize. Here's how to enter. Good luck to you all.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, text the word cash to 83338 and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or you can enter for free by calling 0330 880 3338. All entries must be received by the 6th of November at 4 p.m. This is a talkSPORT limited promotion run on talkSPORT, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Yes, Andy. Now let's look at the Europa League and the Conference League. I want to start with Rangers against Roma. Roma could have gone top tonight in Italy if they'd won. Instead, they lost at Milan. And Rangers, Danny Roll, I suppose it's an amazing turnaround. You're at 1 minute, you're trying to put together a squad from nothing at Sheffield Wednesday. And good luck to Sheffield Wednesday and all its fans in sorting out that club now that the owner has been removed. Next minute, you're playing a big European game against Roma.
Yeah, and the pressure's inescapable at Rangers. Now, clearly, no one's blaming Danny Roll for anything that doesn't happen at the moment in the crowd at Ibrox, but it's a tough job. There's no doubt about it, and clearly he's got a couple of decent results, and he got a good performance out of them in the League Cup semi against Celtic, despite the fact that a couple of things didn't go their way in that game. So to get under the lights at Ibrox for a European game will be an incredible experience. That will be the moment where he thinks, right, I'm in charge of an absolutely massive club now. That'll really mean something, I think. And look, I think they've got a chance because they've got a chance against anyone at Ibrox. I think the other reservation I have about Roma, and it's remarkable when you say, Danny, that they could have gone top by winning that game, and they would be joint top if it hadn't been for Paulo Dybala having that penalty saved by Mike Maignan, is that Gianpiero Gasperini, you think, okay, sexy football, don't you, straight away? Well, actually, they've been hard to break down, but they've not really looked like scoring that much this season. Now, after that penalty miss and not scoring at San Siro, they've got 10 goals in 10 games this season in Serie A, which makes it all the more remarkable that they've managed to get themselves to the cusp of the summit of Serie A. So I think as well, you look at the last couple of results in this competition, and you know, Roma have enjoyed, like Rangers, brilliant success in Europe in recent years, especially under Jose Mourinho, of course. The fact is they've lost to two teams they shouldn't have lost in the last two games, and at home. They've done 2 of their 4 home games and got no points from those 2 games. So despite winning their first match, they lost at home to Lille, where of course they missed 3 penalties in that one action with Berke Özer saving all 3 of them.
Yeah, amazing.
And then they lost to Viktoria Pilsen last time out, who lost their best player in the summer, and you know, are not pulling up trees in the Czech league. So look, Roma really need to go to Ibrox and get a result, and I wonder if that gives Rangers a bit of an opening.
And if Danny Roll was probably not expecting to be managing in Europe this week, I suspect that the exact same is true of Martin O'Neill, who'd been retired for a decade. Well, the other Glasgow team, Celtic, with Martin at the helm, and having, of course, reached the League Cup final today when they won that Glasgow derby, they go to a tricky old tie against Midtjylland, who did so well against Villa in the last round.
Yeah, and of course, if we talk about, like everyone was talking last week about Martin O'Neill tipping hearts for the league and then ended up managing Celtic again like 2 days later.
Just too good, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think another thing that we need to bring into focus is the fact that last time I saw Martin O'Neill on television, he was being asked about Jose Mourinho's managerial career, and he said he still hadn't forgiven him for Seville in 2003 when he was in charge of Porto. So yeah, particularly interesting situation for him to be put back into Europe. Of course, Midtjylland were the ones I think you can say that really put the skids under Ange Postecoglou by going and winning at the City Ground in that game, where Forest fitted a lot of chances and made a lot of mistakes. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
But Midtjylland have started this season well. They're tough. They've got experience in the Champions League and of getting results in the Champions League. A little bit like Club Brugge. I think they don't get the credit they deserve because they come from a less fashionable league in Europe. But think they're able to bring back a player from the Premier League in his 20s who was an Italian champion last season in Philip Billing. I mean, if that's not pulling power, I don't know what is. So, look, this is a super tough one for Celtic. And, of course, despite having got a couple of decent results at home, and particularly that one against Sturm Graz, they, again, I think, need to bring something back from this.
And continuing the theme of managers who might not have been expecting to be in Europe this season, Sean Dyche, of course, takes his Nottingham Forest to Sturm Graz in Austria.
We're back onto Sturm Graz. This is the Angers and Sturm Graz show, isn't it? We can't
it is,
away from them. And I think Sturm Graz are really victims of their own success because, of course, it's no small thing to finish off the monopoly of Red Bull Salzburg domestically. Going out there and winning the title a couple of years has come at a cost because they lost a coach who reshaped their whole destiny in Christian Ilse, who went to German football and went to Hoffenheim. They lost quite a lot of their best players, including Mika Biret, who had an instant impact, the Londoner in France with Monaco, before having a bit more of a difficult start to this season that I'm sure he'll come back from. But it leaves them in a position where they're fourth in the Austrian Bundesliga, and they don't look like beating anyone in this competition. So look, if Sean Dyche wants to get kick-started in Europe with Nottingham Forest, and I was there when they beat Porto, 10 days ago, and I thought in a tight game, they were really street smart. And what if Sean Dyche is one of these guys who turns out to be totally made for Europe? It reminds me a bit of Jose Luis Mendilibar, when he was thought of as a certain type of coach, someone who you get in when you're battling relegation to batten down the hatches, tighten up your defence, play sensibly. Football's not that exciting, but, we'll take it on the chin just to make sure we're safe. And then, having never taken a European game in his life, past his 60th birthday, comes in at Sevilla 4 months later as a European champion. What if Sean Dyche was the English Mendilibar? That would be really interesting. Before you know it, it'll be up winning trophies for Olympiacos as well.
In the conference, Andy, Crystal Palace are at home to Alkmaar. Palace have had a pretty good start very good start to the season.
Yeah.
And they remain among the favourites for the conference because that's the power of the Premier League.
Yeah, despite that loss to Larnaca last time, which long-term might do them a bit of a favour. I don't think it's going to stop them qualifying with some comfort. But I think you saw Mark Gay being interviewed at the end of that, as we were saying last week, I think, and the realisation for those players, you can talk from a distance about the fact that, it's a different challenge for Palace playing in the Conference League because they're a team that's one of the richest, if not the richest and most powerful. They're expected to control games and break teams down and get everyone behind the ball, which is an inhabitual situation for them. But that was the realisation for those players that actually teams are going to defend against us and we're going to have to break them down. This is a completely new way of thinking out games. So I think that will have done them a little bit of good, actually. And you look at this and I think it does them a favour as well going to AZ, who are one of the better teams in the competition, who've been good in the competition in recent years, who are doing well under Martin Martins. They're only 4 points off the top of the Eredivisie, and won again today at Sparta Rotterdam, despite Troy Parrott missing a penalty for the second time in 2 weeks. And I think they've got enough interest in attacking weapons. They're going to have a go at Palace. And I think probably partially egged on by the fact that, in the last round, Go Ahead Eagles managed to knock over Aston Villa. So AZ are thinking, don't just come here for the cheese market. You've got to come and have a go at us. And I think they will do that. I think it'll be a really, really interesting game.
And finally, Andy, what do you make of Fiorentina? They go to Mainz in Germany, having won no Serie A games, but won all their conference games.
It just doesn't make any sense, does it? Of course, they're transformed in this competition. It feels that there is some sort of cosmic justice if Fiorentina win the competition at some point, because they've been to 2 finals. They were in the semi-final last year, a Titanic semi-final against Betis, while the other was a bit of a wet lettuce. And it feels as if Fiorentina owed something by the Europa Conference League. Now, whether Stefano Pioli will be there at the end of the season to see them through those latter stages is a big question. And look, it's a tough enough game away at Mainz. Mainz were another team who were fantastic domestically last season and have really struggled at the start of this season. Drew against Werder Bremen in the Bundesliga yesterday, even though they played really well and should have won, considered an equaliser to Jens Day right near the end. So this will be really interesting for two teams that I would expect to go relatively deep in the competition.
Well, it's delicious, isn't it? Just Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, just more football you could possibly watch or listen to. Lots of games on talkSPORT and talkSPORT 2. But we're heading towards the finishing line now here on this night's edition of TransEurope Express. And next Andy will be taking us around the leagues. Yeah, I promised to tell you about the, all the games that we've got here on the talkSPORT network from these European nights on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So strap in, because there's a lot to listen to. 5:45, on Tuesday in the evening, Slavia Prague against Arsenal in the Champions League over on talkSPORT 2. They also have at 8 o'clock Coventry against Sheffield United from the Championship. Coventry, of course, top of the Championship. That's over on talkSPORT 2. While at 8 o'clock on Tuesday here on talkSPORT, it is the mighty game between Tottenham and Copenhagen in the Champions League. On Wednesday, the early kick-off over on talkSPORT 2 is Chelsea's long trip to Karabag in the Champions League. And then we've got two big Champions League games for you on the network on Wednesday evening. Here on talkSPORT at 8 o'clock, it's Manchester City against Dortmund. That's the kick-off time. Join us long before that, of course. And over on talkSPORT 2, the game between Newcastle and Athletic Bilbao, which takes us to Thursday, where at the early kick-off, 5:45 in the evening, over on talkSPORT 2 is the game between Sturm Graz and Nottingham Forest in the Europa League. And then here on talkSPORT itself, at 8 o'clock, the Aston Villa against Maccabi Tel Aviv game from the Europa League is live. And finally, over on talkSPORT 2, another 8 o'clock kickoff in the Conference League, where Crystal Palace take on AZ Alkmaar. You don't need me to remind you, but I will anyway. talkSPORT is your home of live football. Andy, I take it you'll be going to about 15 of those games, but we haven't time to discuss that just now. Let's talk about some of the other leagues, starting in the Netherlands, where we continue to watch for signs of life with Ajax, and the team at the bottom of the table had perhaps the most extraordinary result in Europe this weekend.
Yeah, so I feel like I'd be wasting breath and the very limited time we have in describing how Feyenoord and PSV won comfortably and kept things going at the top of the table, because Ajax are falling further and further behind them as things stand. They're now 8 points off the top in fourth place. As we said before when we were talking about AZ, they're in third now, just behind Feyenoord, who are top, just ahead of PSV on goal difference, just one goal difference, plus 20 versus plus 19. Ajax took the lead through Mika Goetz against Heerenveen and couldn't see it out. And really, they didn't really create that much. You know, I think there was an understanding of limited means, but it feels there's a lot less hope than there was under Farioli. And I guess the problem is, as we said before with Ajax, when they change the coach, they've got to change the sporting director as well. So it's all a case of when those cards are going to fall and how much worse it's going to get for Ajax before it gets better. But hey, it's a great weekend to be a Heracles fan, because they're still bottom of the table. They've still lost 9 of their 11 games. But having said that, if you'd have told the team who were bottom of the table at the start of the weekend, you're going to win 8-2 at home, I mean, you'd be pretty pleased with that, wouldn't you? So they won 8-2 at home against Pek Zwolle, who haven't been having the greatest season themselves. They're third from bottom, but still a huge result. Hat trick for Jis Hoornkamp, that is his real name, and a very reliable goal scorer down the years in the Eredivisie. Big day for him. So congratulations to him and to Heracles.
Yeah, for obvious reasons, don't search for Jis Hoornkamp on the internet, particularly not at work. Andy, in Ukraine, it was the Classico, and a huge result, because Dynamo Kiev have gone on a very long unbeaten run that's now curtailed.
Yeah, that's right. So Dynamo Kiev won the league unbeaten last season, and they beat Shakhtar in the Ukrainian Cup in midweek. So we're talking about two very intense games, two versions of the Classico in the space of 5 days. Shakhtar got their revenge in this one in Lviv. 3-1 victory for Shakhtar. The tone set by Eginaldo with a great header at the near post early on. Goal of the game by Neverton, smashed in from absolutely miles out in the second half. And they held on in the end, Shakhtar. I mean, look, what I really enjoy about these games at the moment, and of course, they don't really get the wide viewership that they should do across Europe for obvious reasons, is that because they're not the games that get great viewership either internationally or in the stadium, of course, because for obvious reasons there's limited crowds. Even though there are crowds, there are limited crowds. There were enough crowds that the game had to be stopped for flares being thrown on the pitch by visiting Dynamo Kiev fans in Lviv today. Is that it feels as if the emotions of the derby have felt a lot more intensely. So in recent Shakhtar Dynamo games, you get a lot more dust-ups between the players. You get a lot more complaining about the referees. You get a lot more diving, all that sort of stuff that really, I guess, is partly due to self-motivation and partly because they do actually have fans back in the stadium now. But it was another really exhilarating game. Dinamo really fought to keep that unbeaten record. They should have had a penalty at 2-1. Then again, Andrei Yarmolenko got away with grabbing Valery Bondar by the throat. And then after all this happened, the minute the final whistle goes, it's all civilised discussion and everyone having a cuddle. And Shakhtar in a great position on top of the table.
Well, if the Ukrainian Classico was exciting, I'm going to pass very swiftly over the Swiss equivalent because that ended Young Boys 0, Basel 0, neither team doing any good. So which takes us, Andy, finally to obviously Portugal. They kick off their football very late indeed. So the big game tonight was between Porto and Braga. How did that end?
Yeah, past everyone's bedtime but ours on a Sunday, I think it's fair to say, Danny. But a really important win for Porto, keeping their unbeaten start to the season going. They beat Braga 2-1. Borja Sainz, formerly of Norwich, of course, scoring a very, very nice winning goal after Rodrigo Mora's opener had been pegged back. And, big win for Porto. They've only dropped 2 points in the first 10 games, so they're on 20 points. But it'd be in Portugal, they're only 3 points clear. And with Benfica having had, I think, their best performance in the second half at Vitória Guimarães yesterday, where they won 3-0 since Mourinho turned up. And they're still unbeaten, of course, having drawn a couple. We've got a really promising title race in Portugal.
Right, Andy, thank you very much, Steve, for that. Now, without no further jokes about you being around the world in 80 lanyards, where are you going to watch football this week, very briefly?
Spurs, Newcastle, Rangers, in that order.
Oh, fantastic. Of course, you'll report back on all those games next Sunday here on TransEurope Express, where we're rapidly heading towards the finish line. In our poll, 42% of you think that Vinicius, if he leaves Real Madrid, will end up in Saudi Arabia. I'll be back tomorrow on H&J from about 1:15. Next up here is the best of talkSPORT Daily. Thanks for listening. God bless you all, and good night.